It is so vitally important that you prioritize this, because you can do all the manicures and pedicures in the world, but your burnout is not going to go away until you start setting those boundaries. And it's because oftentimes when we try to do self-care, we try to jam it into an already full schedule. We try to jam it into an already full life where we're already exhausted and depleted emotionally and physically. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mia Hemstad, and oh my word, I just hit 1,000 subscribers last week. And I just want to say thank you so much to every single one of you who has subscribed to my channel. I started this channel in May of 2017. So it's been almost 4 years exactly, and I just have to say thank you so much. I started this channel to help me share my journey of paying attention to my mental health, taking care of myself. I was in a dark place. I was struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety, and in 2019, I was diagnosed formally with PTSD and depression, and I have been working on that and going to therapy and healing, and it's just been a lot. And I'm just so excited to start sharing all of these lessons I've learned with you and just the journey, because even though we've made so much progress, I still think that mental health is so stigmatized and people don't feel like they can talk about it. So that's one of the reasons. I would say the biggest mission of this channel is to normalize that conversation and to just have an open dialogue to help folks out there who don't have anyone to ask, like, what meds did you take and how did that work for you and how did you get a diagnosis, and all of those questions. So if you have questions related to that, please let me know. And if you're new here, I am a mom of 2 kids, 4.5 and 2.5 are their current ages, and you can read more about me at my website, which I will link in the description. So one of the things I have been doing is I have been working as a self-care coach, and what that means is I help women in particular work on practicing sustainable self-care rituals and also learning to release all the baggage mentally that makes us feel guilty and anxious about taking care of ourselves. And this is something that, of course, I have learned over the last 7 years really of trying to figure out how to stop burning myself out, how to stop participating in hustle culture, and how to make wellness not just something that I do when I'm falling apart, but something that I do on a regular basis and feel good about and proud of. And one of the things that has been coming up a lot with my clients and also the people who follow me over on Instagram is boundaries. It's such a massive topic and it can really vary from person to person, and I think it's so important to get individual advice from a mentor or a coach or a therapist if you can, because it's gonna vary so much depending on if you're setting boundaries with a coworker or a romantic partner or a parent. Did you even know what boundaries were before you clicked on this video? I, for one, did not know what boundaries were until 2018 when I really focused in on my healing journey because I could finally afford some therapy. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. It should really be more accessible. And my therapist was very adamant that we just focus on setting boundaries. And so 2018 became the year of setting boundaries. I literally was working on having one hard conversation after another, after another, after another. And this ended up completely changing my life. And I teach it in my programs. I teach it on Instagram. I talk about it a lot because it's something that I know is a prerequisite to self-care. So this is something that I teach just as a principle. Setting boundaries is a prerequisite to self-care. And what does that mean? I am a firm believer in sustainable self-care. I do not love the overemphasis on social media of these like one-off day trips or quarterly, vacations. I think that's incredible. I also know that it's very inaccessible for a lot of people. And so then we keep women and especially mothers in the cycle of burnout. I want to help you learn to take care of yourself every single day. And I think that's way more powerful and important for you to learn rather than saving up for this one trip that you do once a year. And boundaries are the prerequisite to that. They are the thing you need to learn to do before you can really have sustainable, regular, consistent self-care. And so when I started to talk to my clients about this in our support group, I noticed that people were like, okay, I know I need to set boundaries, but I literally have no idea where to start with this conversation with my mom, or this conversation with my grandmother, or this conversation with my boss, or this conversation with my boyfriend. And I realized that we really got to go deeper. We got to go into the nitty gritty. And this is why there are whole books on boundaries, because I think that having examples of conversations and different scripts even to use and modify can help, especially when you're at a complete loss for words for how to have these hard conversations. It's really difficult work, but it's also, again, one of the most important steps in my healing journey. Like, I have been on a healing journey for the last 7 years, but it wasn't until 2018 when I learned to set boundaries and had the support of someone outside of me who wasn't related to anyone or connected to anyone I was setting boundaries with, to have that regular support, to have someone to talk to. Because when you set boundaries and it's new for you, and I would argue, especially if you are a woman, it's harder, because we're taught that we need to be constantly available and at service to everyone, and that making anyone upset or saying no to anyone is like one of the worst things we can do. And so I think that we have a lot to unpack when it comes to boundaries. And part of that is the societal issue of the pressure that we put on women. And then another part of that is just like this desire to be liked and to belong. And so it requires a lot of unlearning. So I just really don't want to simplify it, oversimplify it. This is going to be one video of probably several, and I would love to hear your questions in the comments to see how I can help you with your particular situation. But so today we're really going to be focusing on 3 reasons why you're not setting boundaries, in order to just focus today's video and not make it 3 hours long. So if you like this video, please make sure you give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button and the bell, because it really supports my channel and helps me to keep making videos and helps the growth and success of this channel. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, so reason number 1 why you're not setting boundaries, why you're struggling to set boundaries, is it's because it's a family member. It's someone that you're close to, that you're related to, that you need to set the boundary with. And this is a very common challenge, so you are not alone if this is you. And I just have to say that there's a lot to unpack here. So for everyone it's different, but what I see the most in the DMs that I go through and the clients that I serve is that it's usually with the parent, and we feel this sense of obligation, this sense of I owe everything to this parent, and so therefore I must always be available, I must always say yes, I must never say no. And that is very much embedded into our culture. It is very much embedded into the parent-child relationship, and depending on what ethnicity you are from, it could actually be more intense, more required, more obligatory, right? So there's a lot to unpack there, but here's some general tips I want to give you. Number 1, any relationship that is founded on obligation is not a mutually beneficial and respectful relationship. Any relationship where you feel required to give of yourself, even when it's not healthy for you, is based on a little bit of coercion. And I understand that we feel that we owe our lives to our parents because, yeah, you wouldn't be here if your mom didn't give birth to you and if you weren't fed and housed and things like that. But I also need to remind you that you didn't ask to be born, and you didn't ask to be born by these specific people. Yes, it's great and it's good that you were given life and that you are alive, but it doesn't mean that you must act as if you are like the servant in the relationship, like you are owned by someone else. I mean, think about it. If you feel like you have to answer the phone every time your mom calls, or if she texts and you have to respond, or your dad requires you to be, at home helping with the yard work every Saturday, even though maybe you have your own family, whatever it is, if you feel like you must do what your parent says no matter what, especially when you're an adult, like the child under 18 thing, if you're living with them, it's different. But then you are acting as if you were this person's property. And I know culturally it's very normal to do this, but I really have to challenge this because I talk to way too many people who are suffocating by this type of dynamic that you're not property. And when we act from a place of fear and coercion and fear of being like mistreated, when we act from that place, we are acting as if we are someone's property, and you are no one's property. Even when you're a child, it can feel like we are our parents' property because we live under their roof. You are not anyone's property. All relationships need to be based from a place of mutual respect, at least at the bare minimum. And hopefully there's love there if it is your parent. mutual respect. And mutual respect means that you act out of respect and that person respects you and respects your no, or respects your schedule, respects your availability, respects your capacity. And if they don't, then you need to ask yourself if you are being treated as if you are property. You are not property. And in my opinion, and in my experience, the best relationships are based on a foundation of love and mutual respect. Free will and free choice are a part of that love and mutual respect. So if ever you feel like you're doing something not out of your free will and your free choice, but you're doing it because you're scared of being mistreated, you're scared of being yelled at, maybe you're scared of being hit, maybe you're scared of getting the cold shoulder, those responses are not your fault. Those responses are the fault of the person doing it to you, and that is using manipulation and coercion tactics to get the result that they want. So you have to try to separate out. I know it's like, well, this is my parent and I know that they love me. Yes, but that doesn't mean that they are free from making mistakes or that they are free from these like tactics. So you need to really try to remember that free will and free choice are a foundation of love and mutual respect in relationships. And if you are saying yes because you're worried about what will happen if you say no, that is a huge red flag. That is a massive red flag that you need to talk about with a counselor or a therapist or a coach or somebody who can help you piece that out, because it can be really tricky when it is in regards to a family member, especially a parent. And I just have to say that it's so unhealthy. And I see this happen a lot where people are sacrificing their well-being and their boundaries out of fear of what their parent will do to them. And I have to say that is not a good place to continue on that track of that relationship. Another thing I want to say is that if a family member or a parent has violated your safety or your dignity through abuse, harm, or any other thing related to that, then there is no obligation whatsoever. That relationship, that dynamic has dissolved because they violated your personhood. Again, you're not property. You don't have to endure abuse simply because you were born into a family. It needs that idea, that concept needs to die. That concept that, oh, but it's okay that I was harmed because I owe my life to these people. Absolutely not. It is never, ever okay to be harmed by a parent, by a family member, by a friend, by anyone. And if that happens, then you owe that person nothing, number one. Number two, if you want to repair a relationship with that person has to apologize and make reparation and show real change from that behavior. This is so important. It is so important because we think that in some relationships we have autonomy and we have free choice and free will. And in other relationships, we have none of those rights or abilities, and we are just like owned by this other person. And no, absolutely not. We have to get rid of that. And another thing I want you to consider if you are staying in a relationship with a parent or a family member who is mistreating you is it's not an isolated incident, right? Where you're acting as if you are the property of someone else. The way that you exist in these relationships where it's based on coercion, manipulation, and fear is going to significantly affect your relationships with romantic partners, with your own children and how you treat them. It's going to affect your relationship at work with supervisors and your boss and other superiors. It's going to affect so many things, because if you are used to accommodating someone out of fear or manipulation, you're going to do it in other areas of your life. And if you are used to, in a parent-child relationship, allowing yourself to be hurt or manipulated or coerced or felt or guilted into anything, you might do that to your own children. And this is just, I'm not a psychologist, but I've read a lot of books about the parent-child relationship and the codependency that comes with it. And it does come through. Even though you love your children and you want to be the best parent ever, because that's how you were treated as a child, you are going to pass it down. That is like the essence of generational trauma, and it takes a lot of awareness work and therapy and breaking patterns in order to stop that generational trauma from being passed down. So that's number one. I hope what I just explained can help you. It's really about how you think about your relationship with your parents or your family members. It's about, why do you think you owe them? Why do you think you owe them your life, your existence? And I understand there's like, I want to be there because they're my family and they've been there for me. That's great. That's a good thing. That's from a place of love. But if you start showing up for them because you're worried about how they'll treat you, then that is not love. Then something needs to switch there. And either you need to have a conversation with this family member, which is another video for another day, or you need to set boundaries around how you are available and all those things, which is also another video for another day. The second reason why you're struggling to set boundaries is because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. This is a very legitimate and reasonable concern, and it definitely came up for me. I am a recovering people pleaser and I hate hurting people's feelings. And the first thing I need to point out here is that you very well might hurt somebody's feelings because you might actually have waited too long to set the boundary and your resentment has grown and grown and grown. And then by the time you have that conversation, it's usually impulsive and it's because you snapped and because you're angry, and you might really like take it too far, and it's because you waited too long. And that's why I highly encourage having these conversations beforehand. But if you're already feeling super angry and you're feeling super resentful, be mindful of that. Be aware, call it out, and then you need to prepare a little bit more. You need to probably write down what you're gonna say, have someone else review it to make sure it's not too spicy or too angry, and then maybe have that conversation in a way that's best for you, either through email or text, where you can make sure that your words are like pre-selected if you're going to end up having an explosion if you speak to this person in person. So that's what my recommendation would be for that if you're like feeling really resentful, so that it doesn't become a toxic, explosive, yelling argument. Another thing I want to point out is that some people just always get hurt when they told no. And I need you to know that that is not your fault, and all of us need to get used to being told no. All of us just need to become accustomed to the fact that people are allowed to tell us no, and that's okay, and that's healthy. The second thing about the hurt feelings thing is that it's not your life's purpose to constantly modify yourself and suppress your own needs and desires in order to protect other people's feelings. You cannot spend your whole life and all of your energy trying to make sure that no one's feelings are hurt. That is not your job. Release that responsibility. You might struggle with this if when you were a kid, you were in an emotionally unstable environment and you had to constantly modify yourself, or maybe even suppress your needs completely in order to keep, let's say, your parents or your family members or whoever you were around from exploding. It could even have been a teacher. It could even have been a coworker. One time I worked at a company with a boss who was highly explosive. So I remember constantly like speaking a certain way to make him happy. So what I'm trying to say is it could be anywhere. It could be anywhere where you are changing your behavior to try to control someone else's feelings. That person's emotional issues and their difficulty regulating their own emotions is their problem. And the constant modification of your existence to accommodate this person is extremely unhealthy for you. It is extremely toxic. And I understand that some of us don't have that choice. Like when I was working at that job with the explosive boss, I needed that money and I had no other job. And I stayed at that job for as long as I needed to until I was able to get out. So, don't hear what I'm not saying. I live in the real world. But I think it's important to remember that if like this, what I'm hoping you get from this is that if someone gets mad at you, it's not you. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to change yourself. Let them be angry. And that's the third point I wanted to leave here is you cannot and should not try to control anyone's reactions. Let people have the reactions. And I know that's easier said than done. The need to control people's reactions, again, is like a trauma response. And there is power in letting people have their tantrums. Let people have their tantrums and walk away, and let go of the need to fix it, to modify it, to calm them down. No. And affirm that you did the right thing and you are not required to tame their reaction. That's their job. The third reason why you're probably struggling to set boundaries is that you don't know what to say, and so you say nothing at all. And to this, I literally need to tell you that it's so better to say something imperfectly than to say nothing at all. It's so important to speak up for yourself any way, shape, or form that you can than to say nothing at all. If that conversation needs to happen through text, although I know some people are going to be like, Give that person a phone call. They deserve it. It's like, do they deserve it though? Why are we always bending out of shape for other people who we're having to set boundaries with because they're already taking too much from us? No. Start the boundary setting process by having the conversation in the form that works for you. If that's via text, if that's via email, do it that way instead of phone or in person, because sometimes if we are setting a boundary with a person that has a lot of willpower over our lives, then it can be really hard to set that boundary in real time. So that would be the first thing. Just let it be imperfect and have the conversation in the format that works best for you. Also, another thing that people worry about when it comes to saying the right thing is they're worried that they're gonna say too much. And I know this was me. I always felt like I needed to explain myself and why I was saying no to this commitment, why I was no longer showing up to this event, why I was no longer gonna be able to volunteer on this thing. And I would explain myself. And then I also realized that over-explaining yourself can be considered a trauma response, because you're hoping that if you explain enough that this person will understand and be nice to you. And again, we are not in control of anyone's reactions. They can be nice to you, they can be angry with you. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you honor yourself and you respect yourself and you set your boundaries. So I want you to practice this. I want you to practice writing out that text, writing out that email, deciding what you're gonna say, and then paring it back a few sentences to just be like, hey, sorry, I no longer am available for that. If they say why, first of all, that is crossing a line. They're not entitled to your why. You can just say, because I have other things to do that day, or because I overbooked myself, because I don't have the capacity. Whatever it is, you can be vague. You're allowed to be vague. You don't need to tell people all of your business and have them start to nitpick it and ask you more clarifying questions, which is my next thing. Maybe you're scared to speak up and set that boundary because you're worried that you're gonna enter into a back and forth with someone who is very assertive, or maybe doesn't respect your no in the first place, and they start entering to a back and forth and you feel like you have to justify yourself and you're worried, you start getting anxious and stressed because you're worried that your reason won't be enough and they're gonna haha, see, this isn't good enough. No. So if you're worried about the back and forth, again, be mindful that this person might try to enter into a back and forth with you by asking you all kinds of questions about why you can't do this, or why you won't show up, or why you don't want to have time for an hour-long conversation. And again, just bring yourself back to my first no is enough. My first no is enough. My first no is enough. And you just say no. And if they ask you why, you can respond with something vague. And if they ask you more questions, be like, I don't really feel like entering into a discussion about why. I'm not available and I will talk to you next week. And pay attention to how much these people enter into a back and forth. If someone keeps doing that and asking you clarifying questions, they're being disrespectful. I'm just gonna call it out. They're being disrespectful of your no. If this person respects you and this is a mutually respectful, loving, free will, free choice relationship, they should respect your initial no. They should not feel entitled to having you waste more of your time and energy explaining yourself to them. So if this person keeps asking more questions and disrespecting your boundary, then you need to ask yourself if you really want to have this person in your life. You need to ask yourself if this is okay with you, if this is a relationship you want to continue. Do you really want to meet up with them next Saturday? If this is how they talk to you when you say you can't meet up with them this Saturday. And the same goes for folks who you're scared of their response. If you are scared, if you feel in your body fear when you say no, or you're thinking about saying no to someone, that is something to pay attention to. We often, especially as women, ignore our anger and our fear. We try to act like we're not actually angry and we're not actually scared. I'm just anxious. I just have anxiety. It's listen, I have anxiety, but I can't tell you how much of my, I just have anxiety was actually, no, I'm just around a lot of people who don't respect my boundaries. And I'm around a lot of people who, if I would say no to them, they would get really angry with me. So is it your anxiety, or are you around people who use coercion, manipulation, and fear tactics to get you to do what they want? Is it anxiety, or have you your whole life had to modify yourself and shut up or speak up in order to keep other people in power from hurting you or becoming unstable or becoming reactive? Is it anxiety, or have you always kind of been at the beck and call of people who don't understand what a mutually respectful relationship really means? So I had a whole lot of anxiety before 2018 when I started working on all of this stuff. I still have anxiety, but my anxiety and my depression and my PTSD and my sleep and my life and my income and my positive relationships have gotten so much better with the practice of learning how to set boundaries in my life. I could do a whole nother video about kind of like my story, but it would just be so long. It'll be another video for another day, just about how much this has benefited me. And so a few things I want to leave you with, because those are the 3 reasons why you're struggling to set boundaries. I hope that helped you. But I just want to recap here that the benefits of setting boundaries are so many, but I need you to understand that this work of setting boundaries, it often requires support, because you're going to cry after if you've never done this before, and if someone reacts horribly. You need support. You need someone who's going to celebrate you and be in your corner and say you did a great job. You need someone to run these things by, right? To have accountability, to say, hey, I'm gonna set this boundary with my mom, and here's what I'm gonna say, and this person can be like, oh yeah, that looks great. Talk to me next week. Tell me how it goes. And again, this can be through the form of a counselor or a therapist or a self-care coach. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have somebody who can help you. You know, it's like we think about athletes, right, who are going to go to the Olympics, or even who just train nationally, and they all have coaches that make sure that they get up at 4 a.m., coaches that make sure they're eating properly, coaches that make sure they're training, recovering, competing, showing up at their meets on time, evaluating how their meet, you know, how their races go or whatever. It's like these people have all the support, but then in our regular lives, we just think that we're supposed to figure this all out ourselves. We're supposed to do things that we've never done, you know, and that we've never seen anyone else do, right? It's like, I don't have any examples of people in my family set boundaries. I've never seen other women in my family set boundaries. So this wasn't something that I could do alone. So if that's you, I just want to encourage you to get help. And, you know, in whatever form that takes, in whatever form that you can afford right now, because I think if you watch this video and then you turn it off and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, you're probably going to get scared, and you're probably going to just suppress it, ignore it, and not do it, and then end up in the same situation again. It is so vitally important that you prioritize this, because you can do all the manicures and pedicures in the world, but your burnout is not going to go away until you start setting those boundaries. And it's because oftentimes when we try to do self-care, we try to jam it into an already full schedule. We try to jam it into an already full life where we're already exhausted and depleted emotionally and physically. And when we start to set boundaries, we start to open up that schedule, we start to conserve some of our energy, and then we can start using some of that space and time in our schedule and some of that energy we've conserved to take care of ourselves. Anyway, so yeah, I just want to set realistic expectations, because I know that on social media, boundaries can be very oversimplified. You know, just say no. It's as easy as that. It's really not. It's very much wrapped up in our culture, in our ethnic identity, in being a woman, in having societal pressures, in maybe growing up in an abusive and traumatic household where we had to constantly suppress ourselves in order to stay safe. There's a lot to setting boundaries, so getting professional help is very important. There's also a lot of really amazing books that can go into much further detail about this, so I highly recommend doing a Google search on some books about boundaries. And then the last thing I wanted to leave you with is remember what it's costing you to do nothing. This is something we don't think about. We know that keeping things the same, as painful as it is, there's familiarity there. We don't rock the boat. We just, you know, muscle through it and continue suffering. But we've survived this far. So we're like, why not just keep going? But I want you to think about, what is it costing you to keep everything the same? Because it might be serving everyone else, but if it's costing you your happiness, if it's costing you your energy, if it's costing you your time, if it's costing you your ability to take care of yourself and do the things you've always wanted to do in your life, then it's too expensive. It's costing you too much, and doing nothing is not a good road to keep taking. So when in doubt, when you're feeling hesitant, when you're feeling scared, and you just really don't want to have those conversations, I want you to ask yourself, what is this costing me? What is not setting this boundary doing to my mental health? What is it doing to my life, my bank account, my well-being, my relationships that I really care about? As a mother, how is it affecting my ability to mother and parent my children? Get clear on that, because everything that we are doing and not doing costs us something, and you have to make sure that you're okay with that cost and make sure that that cost is worth it. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Give this channel a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.